Ricky Hitman Hatton.
Hello and welcome to a very special programme coming to you live on YouTube from Hyde in Greater Manchester. We're at Hatton Health and Fitness, and tonight we're inviting you to Ask the Hitman. So not surprisingly, our main guest tonight is the former two-weight world champion, now of course a very successful boxing promoter and trainer. It is none other than Ricky Hatton. Alongside Ricky, my boxing co-commentary sidekick, former British flyweight champion Mickey Cantwell. Mickey, great to have you along as well tonight. We welcome your comments, of course, through the programme. You can get in touch as ever via YouTube or through Twitter using the hashtag HattonTV. Now, before we go any further, there is a fantastic prize on offer tonight. Let's get it the right way up. This boxing glove is going to be signed by Ricky himself here, and we'll be awarding that to the best question of the evening. Ricky will be judging that. As I say, he'll sign the glove for you, so a fantastic prize on offer if you get involved tonight. Before we get too far with the questions and answers, Ricky, just tell us a little bit about what's going on in the background here tonight.
This is the local amateurs from the Hyde Boxing Club. In fact, the actual amateur boxing club that I used to box for many moons ago. And I have a lot of ventures, you know, in my life. I have my clothing company, I have my television channel, I have my Hatton Promotions, you know, which obviously I promote professional fighters, but it's not all just about the business point of view. I think I speak for most of the professional champions that the amateur game set you on the road to where you become today. So it's nice to give a little bit back to the people that set me going, if you like.
Mickey, I'm sure you'd echo that, because obviously this is the grassroots, this is where it all starts for everybody.
This is where foundations are set, and it gives everyone an opportunity. And what a better place, you know, start your amateur career off in a fantastic gymnasium like this, you know. And we must remember, the two guys training the fellas, they do it voluntarily as well, so that's important that people know that as well, you know, so it's great to see it.
Absolutely. OK, well, we've got plenty to get through tonight, so let's crack on. Our first question comes from a teenager who goes by the initials JMS, not quite a boy band, but not far off. And he says, hello Ricky Hatton, I'm 15 and I'm 63 kilos. How many times and how far should I run a week? And he adds that my brother, who is 17 and 74 kilos, how far and how many times should he run a week? So they're just looking for a bit of advice.
They're probably at a similar age, you know, and at 15 years of age, you know, you're in your adolescent years, aren't you? You know, where your body's still growing. So the last thing you want to do is go doing the runs like the professionals probably would. I would say 15 years of age, Mickey, wouldn't you? You'd probably say maybe a couple of miles, you know, a couple of miles of run. And obviously, as you get nearer your fight, you probably pick the pace up a little bit, you know. But road work's very good. It's very good for making weight, building up stamina. But, you know, you're in your very important years, you're in your growing years. So I wouldn't kill it too much on the road work. But a couple of miles at a really good, you know, steady pace is probably the way forward.
Mickey, I suppose worth mentioning, of course, different ages, people sort of mature at different times as well, and obviously different weights. You've got to tailor your training accordingly, haven't you?
Exactly. You know, listen, I'm sure his coaches would know, you know, give him the right advice. You know, as we can see in the background, there's certain kids at certain age, they all got different strength values, you know, so it's important, as Ricky says, you know, don't overcook it, you know, just, you know, take your time with it.
Well, hope that helps. Thanks for kicking us off tonight. As well as emailed questions, by the way, our cameras have been out and about finding out what you want to ask the Hitman. So for the first time tonight, let's take a look.
Hi, my name's Antonio. What was your favourite knockout from your career?
Short and sweet, Antonio, but good question, I think, nonetheless, Ricky.
I had a lot of knockouts that I was proud of. You know, I always had a very exciting style, so most of my... I had quite a few decent knockouts, but probably I was always known as a body puncher, and I think probably the best body puncher through was when I knocked out Jose Luis Castillo with a left hook to the body. You know, someone as tough as Jose Luis Castillo. Maybe he had seen slightly better years, but still to move a man such as him in that quicker style with a body shot, I think it was a perfect body shot really. Just got him in the right position, shifting me weight and landed it. But also Carlos Mauser, I was cut over both eyes. He was switch hitting. He was about 6 foot tall. And in the end, I just touched him with the right hand, shifted my body weight, and really, my feet left the floor with the left hook. And I think if he'd have got up, I'd have had to jump out. You know, because if he got up from that, they wouldn't have given me much hope, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, but those were probably the two of the knockouts that really come to mind. Firstly, yeah.
I take it from Mickey's wincing, he'd agree, but we'll get on to a couple of other questions as well. Sean McNally first says, been a massive Ricky Hatton fan for years. Saw him when he did his stand-up in Pompey with Frank Bruno, a top night. Man of many talents, of course, Ricky. First question, though, is will he be strapping on the body belt in his future as a trainer, or is that one of the methods Billy Graham used that you won't be adopting? And then secondly, and more importantly, he says, that's a matter of opinion, when he was down in Portsmouth, which bar did Ricky prefer? Let's deal with the body belt first.
No, I will most certainly be using the body belt, but I'm a fan. Listen, you know, as a trainer, you've got to train. You've got to look at the fighter, look at his build, his frame, his style, his technique. And you work round him. Not everybody. There's no point in me doing body belt day in day out with somebody who's 9 stone 6 foot tall. That doesn't make sense. But if you've got like a welterweight who's 5'6", then obviously the body belt is made for him. I think I will be using the body belt no matter what style of boxing slightly, but for some fighters, you'll use it more than others. I actually like the hand mitts as well, for your hand-eye coordination, your timing, and if you want to work on a certain combination for a certain opponent, then the hand mitts are better. But the body belt was really a cross between pad work and sparring. It was like somewhere in the middle, but without the miles on the clock, like you get. So I will be using both the hand mitts and the body belt. The body belt was a real good thing for me in my career. It was my main training attribute. But to be perfectly honest, you've got to look at what fighter you're training, and you think, and then you train you work your training around that fighter's particular style, I think.
Mickey, you echo that, I guess. There's no point having a training program and trying to sort of shoehorn a boxer into it if it's not right for him. I
think that's quite refreshing what Ricky said ago. You actually look at the boxer and see what his attributes are, then you adjust yourself to it. Because I thought we've got some great trainers in this country, but a few adapt the same regimen, through the whole camp. And I think you've got
every fighter's different. You don't train everyone the same, do you?
And I think that's important. But but I always remember with Ricky with the body belt. It's such a big thing because. Was it a week before you do the 15 rounds before you fights, and like 15 rounds in a body belt was like really, really hard work.
Sean, I haven't forgotten your second question, but I'm going to take a liberty. I'm going to answer it myself. I was a student in Portsmouth. That's where I did my journalism training. The Florence Arms in Southsea. That's where you want to go if you're drinking in Portsmouth. Anyway, to prove our global appeal tonight, it's back to VT, and our friends at Hub TV in Los Angeles also want to get in on the act.
Hello, Ricky. How's it going? This is Marcos with Fight Up TV and the Boxing Channel, and wanting to wish you greetings from over here in sunny Southern California. And thank you once again for letting us be a part of this fan experience that you've set up. Now, let's go ahead and get right into the questions. Ben Romero from Fullerton, California asked, what are your views on Saul Alvarez, and how would have you fared if you were pitted against him back in your heyday?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, I'm proud to feel that American people are still, thinking of me, and are still fans, I guess. But big fan of Saul Alvarez. Obviously, he boxed my brother Matthew. Matthew moved up a weight and went the distance with Saul Alvarez, but big, massive fan. Can't speak any more highly. He's everything that I love about boxing. He's a nice kid. He's down to earth. He has a very exciting style, and it's frightening, how he's improving, bearing in mind the age of him. I just think, he's going to go through the weights. I think we're looking at a future pound for pound #1. I think,
right, as good as that.
Yeah, listen, he's at the rookie stage of his professional career. He's only going to get better, and it's a pleasure to watch him. And even though I'm not, not actively fighting now, being a promoter and still being in the game, I'm still a boxing fan. And I will watch his career, and I wish him all the very best, and I watch his career intensely. I mean, obviously, if me and Saul Alvarez would have fought each other, that would have been certainly one for the faint-hearted, wasn't it? I mean, I'm very proud to say, the way he's looking, at the minute, I think he could be, he will probably be thinking, I can be an all-time great. In fact, that's the standard he's got to set himself, and he's at the early stages of his career. But I prided myself, in fighting the absolute best. There's one thing they can never say, I never shied away from anyone. I boxed Mayweather, I boxed Pacquiao, I boxed Costa. I never took a backward step. That was probably half my problem when I think of the fights with Mayweather and Pacquiao. But no, I think this fellow will go right to the top of the pound for pound list, very much so.
There you are, he's only going to get better. You heard it here first. Believe me, Marcos himself is only just warming up. He's back with another question.
Esto Hoos from Austin, Texas writes, what has been the hardest thing for you about retiring?
So what's been the hardest thing for you about
Well, the
retiring?
hardest thing about retiring is, I think, the day-to-day, being in the gym, working hard, and there's nothing better, you know, when you start a training camp from like 10 or 12 weeks out, you get your weight down, you build your fitness up, you know, you start off on your 4 rounds, then your 6 rounds, then 8, then 10, then 12, and you go right through it. You know, when you get your opponent and you get the tapes and you study him and you come in the gym and you try and put what you've seen on tape, put it into practice, what would work for you, what won't work for you, and what your opponent's strengths and weaknesses. And then at the end of all that hard work, whether the dieting, the training, the sparring, the road work, the studying the videotapes, and then when you get your hand raised in front of thousands of people, it's like a drug. It's very addictive, you know. And when you've had the success that I was very fortunate to have, you know, when that to finally say goodbye to that, it really is, you know, really is heartbreaking. And it was the only, you know, and for most boxers, for me, it was certainly when I left school, I went straight into professional boxing. It's the only job I've ever had, apart from fit a few dodgy carpets for my dad, but it's the only job I ever had, really. And then all of a sudden, you know, you retire and you're left with, what do I do now? It's very hard to come to terms with. And my retirement, you know, the manner in which I got beat by Manny Pacquiao in 2 rounds, I got flattened. Very hard for being
Not
proud.
the way you wanted to go.
Yeah, you know, I've always been, you know, heart on my sleeve, a very proud man. To get beat in that matter was very hard. And then when I tried to come back, I couldn't. And bit by bit, you know, and I suffered terribly from depression for a long period of time. But like any champion, you come out the other end. And now I'm promoting, you know, and training fighters, and you know, life is good again now. But I think it's just saying bye to something that was such a big part of your life was very, very hard.
And Mickey, I suppose you're retired as well now. If you can't be in there boxing, you can be on the outside talking about
I think
it.
I can echo what Ricky says, but as well as, and I'm pretty sure you say the same, it's also all the banter, you know. Everyone, you know, you're all thriving for the same things, but you miss the banter, don't you, day to day, like getting jibbed and stuff like that.
If you're in America, banter means sense of humour.
But yeah,
You should put subtitles over it.
But no, yeah.
No, carry on, mate.
But no, he took the words right in my mouth. That's what it's all about as well, you know, the day-to-day, having the fun as well.
Every day with your gym mates, training, you're all heading towards the same goal, getting fit for your fights. It's like your gym friends become your family, don't you? And then all of a sudden, you know, it's gone, and it's very, very hard, very hard.
But as you say, life goes on. So do the questions. Next one I've got written down for me. It says, hello Ricky, great to see how enthusiastic you looked on ringside the other week, talking about training young Adam Little. Who would you say is the best trainer you've worked under over the years, and how's things in the gym working alongside a great coach like Bob Shannon? Many thanks. That's from Rich Campbell.
Well, Billy Graham was the best trainer for me. Billy Graham was known for his his fitness and the condition that his fighters got in. And he probably wasn't best well known for his tactical side of the game, but believe you me, he was very, very tactical. He was probably the most tactical coach I've worked with as well. So Billy Graham was the best coach I've worked with. I worked with Floyd Mayweather Sr., and I learned so much of Floyd Mayweather Sr. You know, sometimes, you know, Floyd Mayweather the Sr. worked on a side of my game which wasn't my strongest, which was my defence. You know, I was just so aggressive sometimes. I was concentrating too much on the punches going that way, and I forgot what was going away. And Floyd taught me a lot of, you know, a lot of different things and a lot of good things. And I've been working alongside Bob Shannon from time to time in the gym. And as you're going into a boxing coach, you know, you work a bit with it. There's stuff that Billy did which I didn't quite agree with. You know, but you know, and so you take the best out of what Billy does, and you work with Floyd, and some of that you don't agree with, and some you do agree with, and you work with all the coaches I've worked with, amateur and pro. You just pick the bones out of everything, and you use what you think works for you. You put your own little spin on things, and I'd like to think I've got, you know, a good balance now. Just because you've been a good fighter doesn't mean you're going to make a good trainer. But I've learned so much from what I've done in the ring and working with all these coaches, and I would like to pass it on to someone else. And you know, if I had my last pound, I'd put money on me being an excellent coach, but you know, time will tell, won't it?
Mickey, echo that. Obviously, you worked with a few trainers. I guess it's about taking a little bit, as Ricky
again,
says, a bit of the best from everybody, and being
so
your own man at the end of the day.
That is so important. That, you know, you don't mind learning from everyone. I even walked in the night earlier on. I was watching one of the young coaches, and I said to him, "You're a really good southpaw coach. You know, if you can pick up pieces that Ricky says and adapt your style to that, I think that's brilliant. But you got to be adaptable, and you got to be willing to learn all the time. And I think you can't stop learning.
Because some coaches can't do southpaw pads, believe it or not. And you know, sooner or later, that one of them opponents is going to walk through the door, and you're going to be fighting one. And if, as a trainer, if you can't do it, your fighter's going to suffer. So I mean, it's versatility as a trainer. You know, picking the best of everything, and just looking at a fighter and think, right, I need to train him different to train the next guy. You know, because everyone's different. Some people fight at higher tempo, and some people fight at low tempo. Some people are stocky, some people are tall, some people are short. And you've got to look and take everything and train everyone as an individual. Not every one person should be trained the same way, I think.
Absolutely. It's not a case of one size fits all, certainly. Right, next question from Patrick Robinson, who's a big fan, he says, from the US. Wondering if you had any plans to fight again on this side of the water. He says he didn't get a chance to see your last fight over here in person. So he's a bit disappointed, obviously, but I think you've made it pretty clear your decision on that.
No one more disappointed me when I had to hand the gloves up. But, you know, by the time, you know, I fought Floyd Mayweather and I fought Manny Pacquiao and all them. But, you know, by the time I fought Manny Pacquiao, that was my 48th fight. And the way I used to fight, you know, I had lots of boxing ability, believe it or not. I had a good left jab, I had good boxing ability, and I showed that in a handful of fights, a box like Ray Oliveira and Juan Urango, and I showed that I did have that in my armory, but I was too aggressive. I mean, that would be, you know, against Floyd Mayweather, you know. I no doubt I could have saw the final bell against Floyd Mayweather, but for as long as I was in there, you know, I wanted to knock him out, you know, and that worked against me in the end because obviously, you know, I ran onto a wonderful left hook, and Manny Pacquiao, I tried to jump down Manny's throat, and the same happened there, you know. So that's one thing I take into coaching, you know, is that, you know,
you know, without putting words into your mouth, what you're saying is sometimes your strengths can be your weaknesses. Even,
you know, when I go into coaching, I'm aware of everything that I did well that I can pass on to a youngster, but I'm more aware of what I did wrong because I don't want my fighters to make the same mistakes as, you know, as me. But it was very hard to come to terms with, you know, retirement. You know, I come back from the Mayweather fight where I was obviously disheartened and give it another go. Everyone likes a comeback story, and I did come back strong. I beat Lascano in front of 58,000 at the City of Manchester Stadium, and then I beat Paulie Malignaggi, was the first man to stop him, which the manner of that performance gave me the chance to fight again for the #1 pound-for-pound title. But then when I tried to come back again, you know, that comeback story had finished. You know, I was coming in the gym trying, and I didn't want to believe it. You know, I knew it was over, and I held on to it for a bit, holding on to that dream that was no longer there. And a bit by bit, it made me so poorly that I'd suffered from depression and landed myself in all kinds of trouble. So categorically, there's no way I will be coming back now because I've finally drawn a line under it, and in doing that, it was the best decision I made because I'm in a nice, happy place now.
Fair enough. Back to the pictures. Next question comes from Craig Turner, I think.
Hi Ricky, I'm Craig Turner. I'm the head of the Advanced Apprenticeship in Sport and Excellence here at Filton, Bristol Academy of Sport at Filton College. We've got kids here that have been identified as elites or have the potential to be elite sportsmen and women. I was just wondering, Ricky, when you decided to become a professional boxer, who was your main point of call for advice on that, and were you happy with the advice you received?
Well, yeah, from a boxing point of view, the main thing is your coach, isn't it? You know, you listen to your coach, but I think it's very, you know, important that you have good friends around you. I think it's very important that you have a good family around you because, I mean, like I keep referring back to me being a trainer now, you know, it's not just, you know, what you do with the boxer inside these four walls, you know, because sooner or later he leaves these four walls and he needs to be given advice, you know, because it's a big, you know, dangerous wild world out there, you know, and there's so many, you know, pitfalls and bad situations you can end yourself in. So I think you need to have good advice in the gym, really listen to your coach and listen to your loved ones and your family around you because, I mean, they, you know, they love you whether you're a boxer or not a boxer, and they would advise you on life. And then when you come in the boxing gym, you listen to your boxing coach. So I think you've got to have good people around you in the gym, good coaches to give you advice, and good friends and family around you because, I mean, you know, it's not all about what happens in the four walls of a boxing gym. You know, it's a very, you know, you need the best advice across the board away from the gym as well.
Yeah, very good advice indeed. Right, next question from Dustin Long, New Jersey, USA. Believe me, long name, long question, Dustin, but here we go. He says, Ricky, nice to meet you via YouTube. I'm one of your biggest fans stateside. He says the UFC is growing at an astounding rate in popularity and seems to be moving past boxing on a global scale in popularity. They're a very transparent organisation that gives the fans what they want. You seem to take on the same philosophy with your website, social media channels, and the enormous respect that you have for fighters. Are you going new school, as he calls it, with your promotion and hoping to abandon the old school ways of promoting fights and boxing as a whole? So in other words, he's saying, are you bringing something new to boxing? I think. It's a long question, but I think that's what he's saying.
No, UFC is getting very, very popular. But I think UFC will always have their audience, and boxing would always have our audience.
But can you maybe learn a little bit from each other? Maybe that's what he's really asking.
I think, you know, sometimes, you know, you go to a UFC fight, and no disrespect, you know, the worst two fighters in the world could be fighting, but they make it like an atmosphere with the music and the ring walk and stuff that, which we tend to do in England, maybe not so much in the United States. And, you know, what you're dealing with, you know, don't forget this, you know, boxing fans will go and watch boxing, but there's still that small part of the audience that aren't boxing fans that will go for the night, for the atmosphere and everything. And we've got to make, you go to the UFC fights, and, you know, even if you're watching the worst fight in the world, you just sat there and you still feel like, yeah, something's going to happen. As a promoter, you know, I think more champions should be fighting each other. You know, I think in the years ago where you'd have 5 world champions and they'll have their own title and they didn't want to fight the other guy and didn't want to fight that guy. I think the governing bodies should turn around. Listen, when a fighter wins a world title, you can't blame the fighter for getting a few defences under his belt, earn a few, you know, pounds or dollars, you know, for his family, but then after so many defences, I think the governing bodies should say, right, you've got to fight. You know, not necessarily just a one-on-one contender. I mean, they should have to have a unification.
Well, that possibly goes into his second question, because Dustin Long wanted to get in another question as well, wants his money's worth from the States. He says, like UFC, do you think boxing should eventually move under one umbrella organisation instead of separate promotions, commissions, federations, etc., which might at least get to what you were saying, whereby the best fighters would have to fight each other? But can you really see that happening?
Not at all. No, not at all. Our sport's completely different, you know. I think, you know, UFC is good. I find it quite brutal personally. You know, everyone's got their opinions, but this wouldn't happen in our sport at all. No, there's too many governing bodies. It wouldn't get sanctioned. You know, you couldn't put it on one umbrella anyway. It's too difficult.
Well, you see a lot of boxers that box and they go into the UFC and they come second best a lot of the time, you know, because it doesn't matter how good you are with that, you know, these guys can grab you, they can wrestle you to the ground, they can kick you, they can elbow you, they can knee you, and, you know, it's very, very hard for boxers. On the other hand, if UFCs come, you know, into the boxing and they were just allowed to use that, it would probably be the same thing. So it can't really go on the, you know, the umbrella, but I think we can learn a lot from the UFC in the manner in which they put. It's not just about the fight. It's about the fight, the occasion. It's the whole lot. You know, we can learn a lot from that. You know, because especially in this financial climate now, you need some, you know, to capture the imagination, and UFC do that.
Well, there you go, Dustin. We are watching, seeing what's happening on your side of the pond as well. Next question from Neil Stewart, who says, "Hi, Ricky. Were you furious with Joe Cortez for stopping you fighting your fight on the inside against Mayweather?"
I was, yeah. I mean, you know, Joe Cortez has proven enough times, you know, what a wonderful referee he is. But you know, it was very important to me, you know, for who gets the referee job for me and Floyd. You know, whether he'll let me fight toe to toe, or whether he'll let me, you know, fight at a distance, or whether at least let me have a little bit of a go.
He actually docked you a point in that fight at
one stage, but it was like, you know, when I fought Castillo, me and Castillo, you know, just stood there for like that, and he never even come in, and then it just seemed every time I got near Floyd it was break, and he didn't let me, didn't give me a chance, and bit by bit I got frustrated, not just about the referee, about the wonderful talent of the fella that I'm in with. I mean, I'd be a fool to turn around and say, listen, that's why I got beat. It wasn't, you know, Floyd Mayweather, you know, is Floyd Mayweather because he's the best. And he's an absolute defensive genius, and that was as much as frustrating as it was as the referee. But all I can say is that I don't think it helped. I don't think it helped matters, certainly. And when the punch, that I got the point took off, if it had hit him on the back, it missed. But if it had hit him on the back of the head, I expected it telling off. But normally you get a couple of warnings before the point comes off, and it was off straight away. So along with Floyd leading me a merry dance at times, and the referee breaking me up, and then the point coming off, you know, I think my head just fell off, and it can't do that against someone like Floyd Mayweather, because, you know, what happens is what happened in the fight, and he knocked me out, and you know, it's very hard for me to come to terms with that defeat. But when I see Floyd performing and doing the things he's doing in boxing now, it does make me feel a little bit better about myself.
But perhaps fair to say that Mr. Cortez is not top of Ricky's Christmas card list this year. On to our next question, which I must preface by saying it was sent before Martin Murray's draw with Felix Sturm last Friday, but it's from Aaron from St Helens, who says, providing Martin beats Felix Sturm, has it been discussed for him to fight at the new rugby league stadium just built in St Helens? That would be a great occasion for both Martin and for the town. He also says, all the best, Ricky, good to see you doing well. We obviously know what happened in the Sturm fight, but I mean, it's still a valid point. Whatever Martin goes to next, would that new stadium at St Helens be an option for him?
Yeah, well, as you know, Martin drew with Felix Sturm, and I thought he had very, very hard lines to do it. I've watched it several times since, and I've put the tape on. I've tried to be as biased against Martin as I can do. I still didn't see him losing it.
So for the word he drew, we can put was right.
Well, I thought so, but I mean, I believe there's a clause in the contract where they can have a rematch, and I'd like to think I got to thank Felix Sturm for giving me and Martin the opportunity to fight for the, you know, for the world title. But there's been a lot of controversy surrounding his last two fights. His fight against Matthew Macklin, which could have gone either way, but I think Martin beat him more convincing than Macklin, and he didn't give Macklin the return, you know, and I believe there was financial issues as to why that didn't quite happen. Listen, you know, I can honestly say categorically, we're not going to be greedy. We'll come to Germany again. You know, we just want, you know, Felix to probably do the right thing, you know, and he probably, listen, you know, he's an absolute legend, and, you know, his country should be proud of him, and, you know, he's someone I admire massively, but he should really do the right thing, and he should want to redeem himself a little bit, you know, and sort of like put to bed these controversial, you know, that he's lost his last two fights. I mean, Felix will probably think he won the fight, and I don't blame him for that, because they were very, very close. But while there's a little bit of doubt, and there's certainly a little bit of doubt on my mind, you know, have a rematch and put all them doubts, you know, to bed. And if Martin can win that world title, there's nothing better, you know, bringing your world title fights to your hometown. I did it in Manchester, and I would love to do it in St Helens and be St Helens' first world champion. That'd be something.
Okay, so watch this space on Martin Murray, certainly. Back to VT, one from the ladies, I think.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm from Bristol Academy of Sport. I was wondering what made you want to get into boxing?
Very strange, isn't it, really? Because, I mean, boxing is something maybe your dad's done it, or your grandfather, or someone in the family tree's passed it down to you. You know, no one in the family had ever done boxing, to be honest with you. And I was into, you know, the Bruce Lee films, to be honest, really. But I was watching Bruce Lee films, and I thought, I want to go kickboxing. So I went to kickboxing, and it was clear from the outset, I had talent with my fist, but not with my feet, with me being a little shorty. So then I went to the boxing, and it just went from there. You know, I went to the boxing with a couple of my pals from school. Just go on, might be able to have a fight here tonight. Come on, let's go to the boxing club. So really, as daft as it sounds, you know, I just fell into it, to be honest with you. Started off from kickboxing, then from boxing, and then as my career progressed, you know, I won my first schoolboy championship at 12, and then I won junior ABAs and boys clubs, and then senior ABAs, and then, you know, the calls started coming for you to me box for England, and then, you know, when you think, oh, box for England, the penny sort of like dropped a little bit, then you're not too bad at this. Yeah, and then when I got to like 16, my amateur coach Paul Dunn took me to a few of the professional gyms, and, you know, and I thought, and I just saw all these lads, you know, as hard as the game is, and it is hard, you know, going to the gym, you know, putting the bag in the boot of the car, driving to the gym, doing something they love, as hard as it is. But I mean, how many of us do have a job that we love? You know, it's very rare, you know, and as hard as the game is, you know, getting paid to do something you love. And that's what I did. Nigel Benn was my hero. You know, Nigel Benn, I want to be like Nigel Benn. And that's when it just sort of like fell into boxing. And then as I got better and better, it's one of them sports where you either, the first time you get hit on the nose, you either like it or you don't. I loved it. So.
Mickey, hit on the nose?
Yes, same thing, but no, my first passion was football. I just loved football. I was always dreamed of playing at Wembley in the FA Cup final, but as you know, I'm very short. But no, I went along
away.
Yeah,
it's an illusion, Mick.
I went along to my local amateur club and just get a bit fit. And I just loved the one-on-one situation, and I loved the sweat and tears. You know, so it was great. And I just went from there really, and I stayed and yeah, done all right. Done what Ricky done. I won the British title box, you know, ABA's, boxed for England as well. So yeah.
Boxed for the world title as well.
Yeah.
Done all right,
yeah,
the boy done good. A few years ago, but the boy done good. Back to tape again, I think, for our next questioner.
Hi there, Ricky. What is it like training your very own boxers?
What's it like to train your very own boxers?
Brilliant, really. I mean, when I retired from boxing, obviously I did the promoting, and when I mentioned, you know, like boxing, the training, day-to-day training, that has been a big part of your life for so long, to finally lose it. See, I was still promoting, but I have a lot of great staff at Hatton Promotions, you know, that handle, you know, like the solicitors, the accountants, the marketing department, a great number of staff that do a lot for me. So when you think of the workload I had on a weekly basis, I mean, I have a lot of input into the fighting and picking opponents and moving them up through levels at the right time. You know, that's where my input comes in, but there's not a week's worth of work there for me, you know, so I'd still had a lot of time on me hands, you know, but then the best thing is to come in the gym where I used to be.
Well, like you say, you're still getting that little bit of buzz about being a fighter, even though, as you say, you've hung up the gloves.
Well, it's the only job I've ever had, and, you know, I felt a little bit out of place, you know, sat behind a desk on a laptop and a mobile phone. This has always been my office and what I've been good at, and, you know, nothing I've loved better than being in the gym, you know, every day, passing on, you know, and I get a huge buzz when I show one of my fighters a little move here, do this, and you can see on the face, you know, oh yeah, and, you know, I've really got a good spring in my step now, and it's, you know, hopefully my next aim would be, you know, I don't know how good I'm going to end up, but it won't be for the one to try, and as you know, that's always been my, you know, forte, I guess, but no, it'd be the next best thing would to be bring a fighter along, you know, that can give British boxing fans the same joy, you know, and pride that they got from, hopefully, I give them when I was fighting. That would be the next one, to be the next Joe Kawasaki, Nassim Hamed, Ricky Hatton, Cal Fropp, to bring Amir Khan, bring the next one through, I think.
So I think you can see he's back in his natural habitat and loving it, I think. Next question, Rob Johnson. Thank you, Rob, for your question. He says, how's it going, Ricky? What fight was the biggest war in your professional career?
It could be anyone about 30, that, couldn't it, to be honest? No, I would say the Kosciuszko one was brutal. I needed to stick to him like glue.
Can you actually, while you're in the midst of that, can you enjoy the fact that it's a war?
Is that a serious question?
Well,
no, I know what you're saying, but I mean, nobody expected me to beat Kosciuszko, and Kosciuszko had a big right hand, and his right hand he used to get the most leverage with his right hand when it used to be at the end of the punch. You know, when I thought, if I can stick to him like glue, where he can't get the leverage to get that right hand, dangerous tactics, you know, but I knew if I stood off him for a split second and left that little bit of a gap between me and him, he'd nail me with that right hand. So I had to show unbelievable heart, unbelievable fitness, go through a lot of pain and a lot of, you know, a lot of stick that was coming my way. But I think in the end, you know, I broke his heart in many ways. I think he just thought, you leave me alone, you know, but that, I think that was the tactics to do. Everyone thought, you know, Ricky comes in, he gets it, he'll come rumbling in, and Costa will hit him, and that will be the end of it. But no, I thought they were the right tactics, and they certainly proved the right tactics. And Kosciuszko, he quit on his stool, certainly didn't quit. He did some wonderful work in that fight. You know, himself, you know, he should be proud of himself. And I wasn't far behind him, to be honest with you. It was a little bit like the Thriller Manila, you know, when they said like Joe Frazier had quit and Muhammad Ali says I was that far from doing it. That's how I felt. And also the Louis Collazo fight, when I moved up to welterweight for the first time, you know, lads at 10 stone where I could normally bulldoze all over the ring. I couldn't do it against Louis, and it was a real shock to my system. And Louis was a little bit unheard of at the time, but he was a wonderful fighter, big puncher. You know, in the last round, you know, he did everything but knock me out. And I think it was probably only the knockdown in the first round that won it for me. But absolute wonderful fighter. And then Louis went on to, you know, to have a good fight against Shane Mosley. You know, pushed Shane Mosley very hard. And then a lot of people, I think the HBO judges had him beating Andre Berto. You know, so that was a war. That was an absolute war. Moving up them to 7 pounds.
Makes a big difference.
I mean, next fight,
seem like a lot, but
yeah, but and then my next fight, you know, because of that, my next fight, I moved immediately back down.
Yeah. Mickey, did you do wars in the flyweight division? Are you all grace and style in your days?
I did, but when we talk about elite fights, what Ricky's talking about, I boxed Baby Jack Matt after the world title, and I talk about elite, they're the number ones, That was like brutal for me because, he was like a big puncher, and I had to be very careful, but I took him to a split decision, but in his next fight after me, he went and stopped Michael Carbajal in America, so it shows how good he was. But when you go to the actual, the Premiership fighters, you do know it's a different level, Ricky, innit? That's what Ricky's saying. So yeah, that for me was really brutal.
So I think the answer to the question, if you're going to go to the top, you're going to get involved in some wars along the way. Right, okay guys, take another look at the screen. Next question coming up.
Hi, I'm Tyler from Bristol Academy of Sport, and I was wondering if Mayweather does fight Pacquiao, who do you reckon will win between the pair of them?
Before you answer that, Ricky, just to say we had plenty of other questions. It's obviously a burning issue of the day. Just give a name check to a few people. Junior Mayop from Anaheim, California. John Virey, Jay Figueroa and Terry Payne also effectively asking that question. Is this fight that everybody wants to happen going to happen? It kind of comes back to an earlier question where you said the top fighters should be against each other.
Yeah, it should happen. That is probably not surprised me as the most asked question that have been asked, because they're two modern day greats, and I think with each fight they're looking like all-time greats, which takes the fact that they were the only two to beat me makes me feel quite proud in the end. But I'm a big fan of Manny Pacquiao. He's a wonderful man. But I think Floyd Mayweather would probably beat Manny. He's a wonderful talent. When I had him on the ropes, just couldn't hit the man. And I thought, well, his defence is so good, so I'll try and do it on work rate, rather than actually at the target. And out of maybe 5 punches, maybe one would get through. And up to about 5 rounds, it was sort of not much in it, nip and tuck. But then he pulled away and showed his class. But I think Manny is he's not really as big a thinking fighter as Floyd Mayweather. He's very explosive, he's very quick, he's very powerful. But in a couple of fights, like the Shane Mosley fight, when Manny knocked him down in the first round, and Shane did the opposite to me, I might say, shut up shop and just wanted to last the distance. But he caused Manny, because he went so defensive, loads of problems. And the last fight with Juan Manuel Marquez, who's a very defensive genius, he did the same. And Manny sort of struggled a little bit. I think Manny does well when there's when idiots like me run at him, But I don't say this, Floyd Mayweather with any degree of confidence. If Manny beat Floyd Mayweather, it wouldn't exactly be the shock of the century, to be honest, because they're both wonderful fighters, and I feel very, very proud to have shared the ring with them both. But I think they do get it together and get it on. If they are two of the modern day greats and two of the best fighters, I think they're two all-time greats, really. And if these two fighters that are in the same era don't fight each other, then boxing has lost out on something wonderful.
Just a quick one to Mickey. Is there a danger that if they don't get on with it quickly, that one or other of them is going to be past their peak, and therefore this great showdown is not quite going to be as great as everybody's been anticipating?
That's a possibility. Even Pacquiao's recently been talking about going into government as well. So there's rumours about that. But it was such a shame if they, as Richard, in this era they don't fight, and they are going to come. They are going to become all-time greats. No two ways about it. But for me, not regarding the Marquez result recently, I always think Floyd Mayweather will have too much for him. As you said, very defensive, got great skills. I think he won't be there to get hit. And he knows, obviously, Pacquiao's a ferocious puncher. But it will be so sad for the boxing fans who will lose out. But I think the fight will happen. I've got this.
Fingers crossed. Let's hope it really does.
Okay, so if it happens, we think Floyd by that much, maybe. Next question from Lee Bolton says, "Hi Ricky, I'm hearing a lot of noise about Khan versus Mayweather in 2012. Well, it kind of carries on the theme. What's your opinion on that fight perhaps happening and the outcome if it did?"
Well, you've got to take your hat off to Amir when you think, what was it, three years ago he got knocked out by Bradis Prescott, and everyone had written him off. And the manner in which they were speaking of him, you know, was a little bit unfair, to be honest with you, you know. But like any champion, he scrubbed himself down, pulled himself up.
Do you think he's almost benefited from that it sort of happened at the right time when he could learn and, if you like, be taken down a peg or two almost?
Yeah,
and
you know,
really sort of sharpened his desire.
Nothing more sobering than when, you know, you have a defeat like that. It makes you reevaluate everything, how you fight, how you go about things. But I think the fact that he's even been, from where he come from, that he's even being mentioned in the same breath as Mayweather. People, you know, if you'd have, you know, the day after the Braders-Prescott fight, if you'd have given 500 to 1 for Amir to fight Mayweather, you know, nobody would have took it, you know. But it's a credit to him. He's looking better and better in every fight. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Floyd likes fighters to come to him so he can sit back, he can shoulder, he can roll, can use all his defensive skills. But, you know, Amir would maybe try and beat him at his own game. I mean, it's very rare that Floyd probably fights someone who's probably as quick and will probably want to fight Floyd. It'd be very unusual for Floyd having to having to go on the front foot against someone. Yeah. You know, so I think maybe Amir has got the style. You know, I don't think. I mean, I hope he does. You know, if the fight does come off, I'll be sat ringside cheering Amir on big time. But I don't know whether he beats him. But mate, I think he's certainly got the style.
Yeah,
to beat him. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, Amir, of course, is over in the States, and we're going back over the pond again. Here's our friend Marcos with his latest question.
Gabe Rudiger, a professional mixed martial artist from Los Angeles, California, asks you, Ricky, with your competitive spirits, is it completely gone? Do you ever get the itch to come back and compete?
I always get the itch to come back and compete. I think about it every day, but it's gone. It's gone now. You know, there's always, you know, shall I have one more? Shall I have one more? But it's gone now. You know, and you know, I can honestly say that I gave it myself everything. I kept coming in the gym. I try a little bit of pads, and there was just no motivation there to do it. And I have got that, and it just shows you the fact that how my life crumbled. Because, you know, I couldn't accept the fact that it's never going to happen again. I knew it was never going to happen again, and I was holding on to it. And when I realised, listen, it's not going to happen, I just went so depressed, you know, and down with it. I didn't want to tell, you know. And I used to say to people, you know, they'd say, Ricky, you're going to give it another go, and I'd go, yeah, well, you never know, but I did know. Yeah. And I was holding on to that, you know, is it still there?
Just in case the spark would reignite somehow.
Listen, you know, the way it sent me, listen, you know, your health is your wealth, you know, and I was very, very poorly and ended up doing, you know, very, very silly things. And, you know, all the respect and the pride that British fans and everyone had for me, I was ruining it. And the only thing I asked for, and there's a little bit of sympathy, is that I was a very, very poorly person, you know, and it was that hard. And when I saw what materialised, what happened to me, I thought, listen, Ricky, you've got to get a grip now, retire, draw a line under it, and move on and get on with your life. And that's what I did, and I've never looked back now. Promoting now, you know, training fighters in the gym every day. You know, it's from where I've come from where I came from, to where I am now, and I don't want to even risk the chance of, you know, coming back and giving it, because, you know, I've given myself and my family a lot of heartache, you know, and my fans a lot of heartache, and I'm happy where I am now, so let's just stay here, you know.
Fair enough. I think the message is that one chapter is over, but there's another one very much just beginning. So Ricky's done, but Marcos isn't. He's got another question for us.
George Garcia from Las Vegas, Nevada asked, what are your thoughts on Manchester United and Man City not being or being out of the Champions League, and does Wayne Rooney have any sort of boxing skills?
Well, I'm obviously devastated that Manchester City are out of the Champions League. Not so much Manchester United, but no, I mean, I think I speak for most Manchester fans here.
Shock for the City, though, isn't it? Well, the City.
Well, yeah,
as a whole.
I mean, I think City were in the toughest group, yeah. And they got 10 points and they still went out. So I think they've had really hard lines. I think the first game was a real shock to the system. You know, it was a real, you know, a word that used in boxing terms. It was a real step up in class for us, and I think it was a real shock to the system. And by the time we got the feel of the Champions League, it was probably too late. I did think United would go through, certainly, but they haven't done. But I think I speak for most Manchester fans that, you know, we're enjoying the rivalry. There's nothing better when you go in the pubs and the bars with your mates and you're having a bit of a laugh with with the United fans. You know, that's what it's all about. So obviously when the enemy beats us, you know, you feel like hiding your face. And you know,
the danger is now, of course, Ricky, the pair of you can, you know, concentrate on the Premier League. Could be out of sight by Christmas.
Well,
it's a two-horse race already, isn't it?
Listen, you know, let's have it right. I think City fans will say we never thought we were going to win the Champions League. United probably might, because they've been there and done it so many times. But I think we've got a great chance of the Premier League now. Whether they can hold it together, you know, a football season is it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, you know, and United have judged that distance perfect for years and years on end. So, and I don't want to get too carried away. I'm starting to really get excited, but when you get that with Manchester City, sometimes the wheels always come off. But no, I really enjoying the challenge. I'm pushing them close for the change. You know, they must be boring winning it every year. You know, surely it must be nice when there's that little bit of competition. But no, Wayne Rooney was actually a boxer, you know, before he did football. In the family, a few of the family actually did boxing. He's always been a big boxing fan, and when you see his competitiveness on the football pitch, I reckon he probably could pack a wallop. But you know, going back to the other question, I am retired. So.
And let's hope Wayne Rooney doesn't show his boxing skills in the European Championships. Next question from Spencer from Lincoln, who says, tomorrow night Amir Khan fighting Lamont Peterson in Washington, which we've touched upon a little bit earlier. Do you think this is a dangerous fight for Amir because it's in Peterson's hometown? A similar question, incidentally, we had from Alex Sosa from Houston in Texas. So obviously it's kind of a fight that maybe people would expect Amir to have, but maybe not in Washington.
It's a very dangerous fight, you know, one, whether it be Washington or whether it be in Bolton, to be honest with you. It's a dangerous fight. Lamont Peterson is a very, very capable fighter. He can punch. He's got good boxing ability. I do think Amir is a level above from him now. I mean, just the confidence that he's going over to him at the United States, fighting him in his backyard, just shows what Amir's, you know, all about. He got that big defeat by Brady's Prescott. What do you do? He's packed his suitcase and went over to the wild card and worked with Freddie Roach. That is a champion in every sense of the word, as far as I'm concerned. But he can't take this fella lightly. You know, I mean, if he takes him lightly, he'll get beat. Lamont is a wonderful fighter, but it's not necessarily. Amir has got to go over there and win, and he's got to win in style. Because if you're talking about fighting Floyd Mayweather, you know, nothing better than winning in style. He's gonna secure him a fight with that. You know, he's got to look at this. You know, I'm in against a dangerous opponent. I'll show him the utmost respect that I deserve. But this is my shop window, and I've got to go and do the business, as they say.
Quick word, Mickey, on Amir?
I think he's becoming such a talent. You know, he's getting better and better. You know, he's talking about even after this contest going up to welterweight, and I think he can because of the size of him. I think his speed wins it for him. Yes, it's a dangerous opponent, but I think, you know, he will be too sharp for him, and I think, you know, he'll win on points.
Onward with the Brits, we hope. Next question from Dean Filkins, who says, Ricky, you've fought the two best fighters of this generation in Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. If you could have fought any other fighter that was active during your reign as light welterweight champion, who would it be? So was there anybody who kind of got away that you didn't get it on
well,
with?
No, I'd probably say Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran was maybe a fool to say that, but no, he was my favourite of all time. I met him on several occasions. You know, absolute legend. You know, up and down in weight. He won his first title at 9 stone 9, and then moved up and won his last one at 12 stone. You know, them years later against Darren Barkley. Always give value for money. Fought the best, and he was my absolute hero. And I think, to be honest with you, I mean, with him being my hero, it would have been nice to actually share the ring with him. Like I say, maybe a bit foolish. To share.
Would that have been incredibly hard as well? I mean, I guess in any sport there are people who literally come up against their heroes.
Well, I mean,
and you're then trying to go and knock his lights out.
It was certainly never going to happen with me, but only for simply because of the fact that I would get to know firsthand how good he actually was. You know, I mean, that was for no other reason. You'd probably be a fool, you know, to box someone like Roberto Duran. But no, I think. You know, you go in there, you know, and know how long or how short it went, you can turn around and say, well, yeah, well, that's why he's my hero, I guess.
OK, we've plenty more questions and answers to come, but before that, just a quick reminder of what else we get up to on Hatton TV. Onwards and upwards. Next question from Mark Gilman. Thank you, Mark. He's from London. Why did a fight between you and Miguel Cotto never happen at 140 pounds?
Can't answer that for no other reason. I mean, it was linked a few times and it just never happened. And there's no reason why. It just I fought Mayweather and Castillo and and someone else, and it just never. The only answer I can give is that it just never happened. It wasn't because he avoided me or I avoided him. It just we always got linked together, but we never actually sat down and did it because probably we were just going down another route for whatever reason. But that would have been something else, yeah.
Yeah, so just travelling in different directions, perhaps. Now, to prove you can't keep a good man down, back to Marcos.
Hey Ricky, the questions keep on coming over here in California. Everybody loves you, of course. We have a very special one, actually. Kevin Ioli from Yahoo Sports wants to know how your rehab has been going and how hard has it been for you? Kevin also wants to know, why is it so hard for boxers, former fighters, to transition from boxing into doing other things? And to add on to that question, how has life as a promoter been?
Yeah, well, my rehab is fantastic, really. I mean, at the end of the day, I suffer badly from depression, and I think that was. I mean, obviously, I did. It was very hard for me, for my family, for my girlfriend, for everyone. It was absolutely devastation, type of stuff. But and although it was nothing to be proud of, I mean, the depression was the real problem.
But depression in sport is something that people are only now beginning to realise that actually has been around for a long time, and people have not kind of realised that it was depression, and maybe you didn't realise it was depression until it was,
Well, it is, I mean, people suffer from depression when they lose their jobs, or they get laid off, or stuff like that. What's the difference? Just because you're Ricky Hatton and you've been champion of the world doesn't make you Mr. Universe and make you more solid than anyone else. I loved my game. As I mentioned earlier, I used to go in the gym, train every day, work so hard to get to that point, and then win in front of thousands of people, and it was very, very addictive. And then all of a sudden it's gone, and I just went really, really depressed. And from one day to the next, I didn't even know what I was doing until a few things wound up in the paper, and then I thought, wow, you've worked so hard to achieve everything, the respect and everything that you've done. You're blowing it here now. And then I went in there, and I feel it was more of a depression problem. The other stuff was nothing to be proud of, trust me, but it was more a depression. I had to get my frame of mind right and get this out of my head that, I can still do it, Listen, you idiot, you can't. So draw a line under it, move on, and that's what I did, and I've never looked back.
Fair enough. Next question just come in to me from Kieran Stoker tonight. Thank you very much, Kieran. Says, what are your thoughts on Joe Calzaghe, greatest British fighter of all time? ?
Yeah, there's a good chance of that. He was unbeaten. He beat Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones. You would have to say with Joe Calzaghe, he was in a division where was known for Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, but he, Ben and Eubank made each other because they were in the same era together. Personally, I think I was a bigger fan of Nigel Benn's, obviously for the style aspect, but you'd arguably say Joe could have probably beat them. And Joe probably needed a domestic rival in his weight division, to sort of like. Joe's profile, unfortunately, wasn't as big as Nigel and Chris, but Chris and Nigel had each other. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean to say that Joe wasn't the best of the three of them, which he probably was, to be honest.
Mickey, anybody else's name you'd throw into greatest British fighter of all time? It's quite a question.
It's a big question. I think Joe stands out there. I think his achievements, especially being undefeated as well. He got out undefeated, which in years to come, I think will be be paramount. So I think. For me, Calzaghe, without a doubt.
Time for Culinary Corner. No surprise, I suppose, that with Ricky, some questions about food appear. I think that's starting with our next question on tape.
Hey Ricky, it's Jordan Lee Sands here. Just wondering, what was your diet like before a fight,
Well, my diet before the fight had to be, it has to be like any, your proteins has to be really high, your carbohydrates have to be high, you really have to keep the fluids up. in order to get through the workload. You know, if you're in the gym doing 12 rounds of sparring or 15 rounds on the body belt, or you know, all the circuits and the road work and the sprints that you have to do, the food intake has to be, you know, really, really good. At first, you know, because I was, and there's one thing going into training that I drill into all my fighters, is don't make the same mistake as me in letting yourself go too much in between
too much
training
sort of up
camps.
and down, yeah.
You know, so, you know, it was very extreme at first because I had to, while the training wasn't as intense, my diet went very, very extreme. But then when I broke the camel's back, as we say, you know, then I started increasing my diet, you know, in order to get through the hard graft that you have to do as a boxer. But it had to, my diet was exceptional come through the hard weeks of the fight. But you can imagine in the early stages when I have to get all the blubber off, it had to be quite extreme at first.
Well, following on from that, next question from Matthew Ireland on a similar topic. It says, what was a typical day's eating when you were not in training camp?
Well, we'll probably start off with bacon butties, you know, then I'd probably, you know, go for a walk or come to the gym, do a little bit of training, probably then go to the chippy, you know, fish and chips or chip muffin or something like that, and then of an evening I'd have a takeaway, I'd have a Chinese or an Indian or something like that. That was when it was probably at its best. But there's, you know, it's a funny way of whether it's at your best or whether it's at your worst, isn't it, really? But I mean, no, that's what I drill into all my fighters. Listen, please, this is the hardest game in the world. Please don't make it even harder for yourself by eating rubbish like I used to do and giving yourself that mountain to climb. You know, I had a fight before the fight, and I tell you, it done me no favours. One of the questions I always think is, how good would he have been if I hadn't put my body through the mire so much?
Well, I think, beginning to think I should be Jamie Oliver here, because the next question from Sonny Howie, who wants to know, this is a great question, what's your favourite filling for a pie or pasty?
Favourite filling? Well, it's got to be meat, innit, or something, something like that, yeah.
On a more serious note, he does ask, if you could, and I do like this question, he says, if you could have been ringside for any fight in history, what would you choose? A sort of fantasy boxing fan. Jump into your time machine.
I'd probably
Which
say
fight
the
would you
Fuller
go to?
Manila, something like that. Yeah, the Fuller Manila probably. Yeah. Or, you know, God, you know, the list, you could write a list of, you know, of all of them, couldn't you? You know, probably say Roberto Duran's when he beat Sugar Ray Leonard, because he was my hero, you know, so, but yeah, I think the Fuller Manila is probably the most famous. Or the one in Zaire when Ali beat Foreman, something like that, because you'd like to be ringside, you know, he's the greatest boxer there's ever been, probably one of the greatest men that has ever been, you know, so you'd be a fool not to say you didn't want to be at ringside for one of Muhammad Ali's, and his best ones were obviously the Fuller Manila and the one in Zaire against George Foreman.
So even as a flyweight, Mickey, you'd like to have been there watching the heavyweights?
Without a doubt, I'd love to have seen Julius Caesar Chavez fight live, you know, but for me, the trilogy between Ali and Frazier, any one of them fights would have been, you know, they're real legends, you know. To be at any one of them would have been awesome.
Bit left field, I think, but this is our final food question. Get a load of this.
My name's Adam from Leicester. If you could be a cheese, what cheese would you be and why?
I bet you've never been asked that before,
That
have
is
you?
the worst question I think I've ever been asked in my life.
You won't be getting a boxing glove.
Well, as we were talking about food and telling me fighters, you know, don't make life hard for you now, you know, look after it. So I'd probably have to say, you know, a low-calorie cheddar.
Brilliant answer. Right, Gaz Senior is next. Rick, when you left trainer Billy Graham, do you think it was the wrong decision to go to Floyd Senior?
Sadly,
with hindsight, obviously.
Well, you know, it was the right decision to, you know, to leave Billy Graham. And if things had been differently, and Billy wasn't suffering so badly from his injuries that he was, which it wasn't his fault, he's just wear and tear over the years. So I made the right decision in sadly leaving Billy, which broke my heart. But no, I think for the Malignaggi fight, I learned a lot of things from Floyd. I learned a lot on defence. And I learned a lot of training methods, which I'm using in my training methods now. So I learned a lot from Floyd. And then, but for the Manny Pacquiao, it severely went south. You know, I felt, you know, that there was some times where I was worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. And there was days when people could see me, you know, just really floundering in the gym. Talk about, you know, peak too soon. And I think it needed just a couple of days. Take a foot off the gas, and I wasn't giving it, but I can't, you know, I'm not using that as an excuse of why I lost the fight, you know, because listen, Manny Pacquiao, it'd been an hard enough fight if we'd have had the perfect training camp, just like with the Floyd Mayweather fight. I can't blame that on Joe Cortez because these fighters are who they are. But I think the first fight against Malignaggi was sensational, brilliant, couldn't have gone any better, timed it right. The second fight just severely overcooked it.
Okay, out and about for our next question, back to the VT machine, I think.
Yes, Mr. Hatton. Mr. Russ asked you is, what's the joys of being a promoter?
I like that, Mr. Hatton.
Thank you. Yeah. The joys of being a promoter is obviously I'm passionate about boxing. There's a lot of promoters out there that are very good, and obviously I'm the rookie at the game. But I'm not a business person. You know, I have business people that help me with my company, but I'm a boxing person. And you know, it's like, be nice if we can earn a few pounds along the way. I mean, I'm not coming the game for nothing. I won't be a liar not to say to, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a passion of mine. Boxing has always been a passion of mine. I could have retired and just sat in my house, you know, but no, I wanted to give a little bit back to the sport. That has been so good for me. And there's a huge bill when I bring a fighter along. For instance, you know, like Martin Murray last week in Mannheim, you know, he just didn't get what he deserved. You know, a draw, he deserved more than that. He deserved that world title bout. And when I see the job that myself and the team do in bringing a fighter along, getting him the opportunities like the British Championship, the Commonwealth Championship.
Well, let me stop you there for a minute, Rick, because that brings us nicely into our next one. Question from Brian Howard, talking about bringing people along. He says, could Scott Quigg ever fill the MEN arena? Before you answer that, let's have a look at Scott in action, because he is one of your hottest prospects, no doubt.
Quigg is getting down to business very, very quickly here. Like I said, his record is 17 wins, 11 KOs. The last 5 have come very, very quickly, and I just think he's got too much for Costin here.
Quality of the shots, Phil, the uppercuts.
7, 8,
I think it's all over.
9. His legs have gone. It's a sensational, rapid-fire win for Scott Quigg. And if you thought it was noisy before the fight, just listen to the ovation for him now. Can't imagine there's too much support for Alioni. Not here, at least, this evening. He might well be at home in Argentina. Those watching on the internet.
Both trying a good variety of shots. And that's he always throws.
Quiggs landed. And suddenly the Argentinian crumbles to the floor. And out of nothing, it's all over. He's not going to recover from this. Scott Quigg's arms aloft. It's win number 20. It's his first title, and surely the first of many.
And Quigg's got him in trouble in that corner, but comes back firing back.
And this is what's good from Scott tonight. You know, he's not been gung-ho, he's been very patient.
Bit of a slap to the ribs there from Quigg as he threw the right hook and then went downstairs with the left hook. But now he's continually trapping Varela in the corners a bit more now, Mickey, isn't he?
He is,
and he's landed a big right there, but Varela's taken it well.
Varela's happy to work off the ropes. But that's the left hook to the body.
Down.
Left hook to the body, done it. Great shot from Scott. I think that's took the life out of him. I think it's all over.
He's gone. He has. Scott Quigg's won it in the 7th.
I've always said this kid's exciting. This kid could be an absolute superstar.
Scott fill the MEN arena?
Yeah, he's certainly got the talent and potential. He's got the talent to go all the way. With the financial climate at the minute, selling 20,000 is a tough job. But I mean, if anyone can do it, this man can. I've always spoke so highly of of Scott Quigg. He's got everything. He's got the defence, he's got the boxing ability, he's got the speed, he's got the power. He's dedicated. He's got everything that that takes him to the top. And I honestly think if there's anybody got the last pound knocking about, stick it on this lad to be world champion. I really would.
Mickey, you've watched a lot of Scott, as I have. Going up on that sort of ladder, if you like. I mean, Ricky's obviously come very close with a couple of fighters already this year with world title shots. Is Scott going to be his first world champion as a promoter? Do you reckon?
I think he's going to be one of them, but I think he could be the most exciting. But listen, this kid's lovely. He's so dedicated. He's got a lovely family. you know, his hometown have really embraced him, Bury. So, you know, he's got all that behind him. And that's what you need. You need that support. But listen, you know, Ricky, tell you, he's a lovely young man, you know, but a real exciting talent.
Good that success hasn't gone to his head as well. Right, back to the questions. A whole group of people have asked this, including Alex from York, Ricky Stone from Yarmouth, and Alice Booth in Sydney, Australia. Good day to you, or good day, I suppose. He says, or she says, or they say, Ricky, what are your thoughts about judging? Very topical this. How to stop some of the shocking decisions happening? What structure would you like to see in place?
I don't think we're ever going to stop, you know, the bad decisions, because boxing is an opinion decision, isn't it? How many times have you sat there with your pals watching a fight and you go, he's won that? You know, half of you say he's won it, half of you say he's lost it, you know. But, you know, so we're never going to get away with that, no matter how much you change it. But I think governing bodies or, you know, if you have 2 judges that vote for the fight, well, 118 to 112, you know, and one has it 115 to 114, that fella wants to have his backside kicking, doesn't he? Because something seriously going wrong. I think there should be a law where, you know, when someone comes in, let's get him in front of the board and say, listen, how do you come to that? You know, and he might have good, valid reasons, you know, for it. But I mean, stuff like that needs to do. And you know, if people don't do it, you know, maybe there should be a ranking of judges. There might already be a ranking of judges, but you know, if you make a bad division, right, you know, if you make a bad decision, you go down to the 2nd division. And then when you start doing it right, then you go back up, you know, and maybe something along them lines.
Mickey, if I could be devil's advocate, I mean, what about obviously 3 judges now, and they kind of all count? What about if you had 4, 5 or whatever, and you say knocked off the top one and the bottom one? So if somebody has seen the fight, as you say, completely wrongly almost, you sort of lose that out of the equation. Would that
I think that's a really good point. You know, we're even seeing that, you know, even in the football, in the Premiership, you know, if a referee makes a bad decision, they kind of get demoted, they kind of get... But I think in the amateurs that they have 5 judges, and I know for a fact as well, if 1 or 2 of them judges, you know, don't see how the others, they actually get called in and actually, you know, get put on a suspension. But I think he's right. I think you need a code where, you know, you're marked on performance.
So there's got to be some comeback,
definitely, without a doubt, without a doubt. Because it ain't fair to, obviously, the most important person is the fighter. You know, as we've seen recently, we've cut with some dodgy decisions, especially recently in Germany, where our own fighter, you can see everyone 41.
And it needs to be, because this is how gentlemen, this is how we make our living. It's how they make a living. You know, I win with this fight, I could pay my mortgage off, my kids could go to college. You know, bad decisions come in. It's not, you know, you've got to give, you know, they've really got to look into the judging. I mean, I'm not the expert. You know, I don't have the answers. You know, I mean, somebody else will say, "What are you talking about, Ricky? This is what you should do." But something needs to really, be done for it, because it's people's livelihoods and livings at stake, isn't it? And one bad decision, you know, your head could go down, you could chuck the gloves in, fall out of love with the game, and it makes a big difference, not just on boxing, on lives.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we're just about at our final bell. I think we'll squeeze in one more question. Appropriately enough, Ricky being such a hit in America, that this one comes from the States as well, from Lance Vickers, who says, I was in LA to watch Matthew fight Alvarez. Matthew fought great, he says. How good is Alvarez? We've kind of covered that earlier, but he then goes on to say, and can Matthew be a world champion at welterweight?
Well, let's hope so. In the new year, hopefully he'll get his chance, but, you know, at his own weight, he went the distance with Alvarez, you know, out of weight above his, you know, division, you know, so let's hope he can do it, definitely, you know, from where he's come from, you know, losing a few 6-rounders and, you know, 8-rounders and getting disqualified to the level he's at has been a real success story. So let's hope he can cap his career off next year.
And to sort of round it all off, from talking about, you know, how did people get into boxing? I mean, obviously, I guess it was your success initially, or you taking up the sport, that got Matthew into it, and it's kind of in the blood now of the Hattons, even if it maybe wasn't when you started.
I turned professional, as I mentioned earlier. I was throwing me kit in the boot and driving to the gym and doing something that I loved. I mean, Matthew was on his hands and knees carpet fitting, and he turned pro and said, well, listen, you know, at least, you know, I'm not going to say where it's going to go to, but I'm going to give it a go. You know, and he's not done bad out of giving it a go, has he? You know, European champion, you know, so if he can cap it off with a world title, massive success story.
I think what people got to remember as well with Matthew is that, you know, he only had like a dozen or so amateur contests. So he's done all his learning in the professional side of the sport, and over the last couple of years, he's excelled himself, and rightly so. He's at world level now. So hopefully next year, as Ricky says, he gets another opportunity at his own weight. Oh, and they have double world champions in the family, eh? How bad is that? Brothers.
Not bad at all. Unfortunately, folks, all good things come to an end, and we're just about at our end tonight. Before we go, we've got the glove to decide. Ricky, have you worked out who you reckon's your best question tonight? What do you reckon is the best question?
It's very hard, really. There's so many good questions, and I thank everybody for, you know, from the States and everyone, you know, kindly, you know, coming in with the questions. I think maybe the question of, you know, why do you think it's so tough, you know, for fighters, you know, to cope with retirement, you know. I think I'm not sure which gentleman it was.
Yeah, I think that was maybe one of our viewers from America. I think that was one that Marcos asked. Whoever you were, don't worry, we'll get your details. We'll also get Ricky to sign this to you. We'll get it over to you. Thanks ever so much for your help. Just remains really for me to say thank you to these two guys. First of all, Mickey Cantwell. Mickey, thanks very much indeed. And of course to Ricky. Thanks ever so much for your company tonight. Really enjoyed it. And thank you to you at home for watching. Thanks for all the questions. And don't forget that for all the sort of top boxing news, reviews, live action, of course, keep it www.hattonboxingtv. That's it, though, from Hyde in Manchester. Good night.